humbled and thankful for all those folks who around the country and quite frankly around the globe. We had expats in countries all around the world who engaged in this election, not to mention those in the other 49 states who organized, sent $20, sent up a prayer, sent me, keep at it, Andrew, all throughout the campaign and throughout the process. Those are the folks who, quite frankly, kept me buoyed. They kept me energized through what was one of the most difficult things that I had ever done, and that was pursuing a race for governor. But I'll say here what I said on the trail, which is it isn't about a single individual or a single election cycle. This has got to be about our commitment to the movement, and the movement doesn't begin and end with any one election. It moves through elections. Elections are inflection points in movements, but it's got to continue beyond. And so obviously, I'm looking forward to the next opportunity I get to serve people from a public policy making standpoint. But in the meantime, I'm going to work. I'm going back to the basics. I'm going to toil in the field. I'm making sure that we get voiceless people their voices again, help them stiffen their spine to the challenges that we have to confront and re-engage in this process, not as a spectator, but as a player on the field. I was always told if you are not at the table, it means you're likely on the menu. And so what this is going to require is that not only do we pull up our own folding chair to the table, but in some cases, we're going to have to flip that table over and build our own so that we can ensure that the issues that are first and foremost in our lives every day, the challenges that we wake up to and have to persist through, are the ones that are being addressed at the table of public policy making. And quite frankly, that won't be resolved in a single election. That will be resolved in an unapologetic, fierce commitment to movement building that, again, builds a table that we all get to pull up a seat to. Well, I'll tell you, although high, by comparison to other elections and other races, we still have a long way to go for full participation in the process. Young people are still voting at half the turnout of their older peers. If young people by themselves, 18 to 25-year-olds, decided to really vote their strength, there isn't an election in this state that we couldn't decide. The same is true, quite frankly, for other marginalized communities. And I get why it's difficult. If you have been, observing the process and you've seen an election come and go and situations and circumstances in your community still haven't changed, I get why you don't believe that voting is of paramount importance. But quite frankly, it's a catch-22. While you don't feel like you're seeing the change that you want to see happen in your community, and so you don't participate in the process, the people who do get to participate and choose who leads then are the ones who, quite frankly, get their needs addressed. That's why the kind of policy that we see flowing from our elected officials in my state is so conservative, is so anti-working people, is so anti-public education, is so anti-common sense gun reform, is so anti-immigrant, because those communities who sit at the crosshairs of the impact are not the ones who are necessarily deciding who goes into office. And so, my argument to folks who have chosen not to participate in the political process in my state is, yes, change happens slowly. And yes, it can be a winding road. And yes, it is ripe with many disappointments. But you got to stick to it. You got to engage. You cannot sideline if you want elected officials to pay attention to your issues, to your concerns, to the needs of your community. We were proud in many ways of the uptick in participation. Almost doesn't count, to quote Brandy. We got to now put this thing over the finish line by participating at higher rates so that we're the ones who get to choose who gets to lead this state and, quite frankly, gets to lead this country. Yeah, well, the truth is that, the Republicans right now are in the driver's seat as it relates to, the regulatory environment. They get to set the rules. And so as it relates to voter disenfranchisement, it is just something that we have to bake into the cake here in the South. I think, Stacey will probably share similar reflections, from her standpoint in Georgia. We got to contend with these things until we find ourselves in power and we get to then change them. And so while voter suppression is a real issue, and we got to challenge it at the courts and in the legislature, and quite frankly, on the streets. We also have to, build the boat and row it at the same time. And so part of building that boat means adding more people to the voter rolls, adding more progressives, more Democrats, more people from marginalized communities to the voter rolls, so that we stand a fighting chance of being able to elect representatives who would then start to dismantle some of these suppressive laws that are intended to keep us out of the process. Some of the strategies we're pursuing is one, we've learned our lesson. You cannot engage people in the last couple of weeks of an election and think that that is going to be timely enough to produce the kind of outcomes that we want to achieve. That's not how we do with older voters. We talk to them year in, year out, inside election cycles, outside election cycles. We're showing up in their neighborhoods, at their town hall meetings, answering their questions, being responsive to them. Well, we're doing that because they have shown themselves to be a very, very powerful voting constituency. So what we now have to build is a very powerful counterbalance to that constituency, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're showing up now, more than a year out, 400 days plus out from the presidential election, canvassing in communities that oftentimes get ignored until the very last minute, putting boots on the ground with people showing up at their doorsteps who actually look like them, sound like them, come from their neighborhoods, have cultural competency, rather than, parachuting people in who have no clue what it means to organize in marginalized communities. So we're hiring people from those communities and then turning them back over to their own neighborhoods. Well, Florida is a 1% state. I've seen polls that show, various candidates leading Donald Trump in the state of Florida by multiple points. I don't believe it. I got to tell you, I know this firsthand. I ran in the state of Florida and was on the 18th ballot. In my primary race, there wasn't a single public poll that showed me winning the primary race. In the general election, there wasn't a single poll that showed me losing the race for governor. So the truth is forget the polls. What matters at this point is organizing on the ground. My premonition is that the person who wins Florida's 29 electoral votes is going to be the campaign and the side that does the best job at organizing. As I've come, to say and recognize post my own election, I don't believe Florida is a red state. I don't think we're a purple state. For the purposes of Democrats, I think we are an unorganized state. And the way we win the state of Florida is by getting organized. I'm almost candidate agnostic. I got to be honest about this. While I may have my own personal favorites, I believe that the one who wins the state of Florida is going to be the side that organizes the state of Florida the best. Well, I think, unfortunately, my state, we come similar to California and some of the other big states. We come a little bit later, although we're earlier than maybe some previous presidential preference years. Our primary won't be until the week or so after you all, after California's. Then Florida, will be in the mix in late March of 2020. And so right now, most of the organizing that's being done is happening in, quite frankly, the whitest states, right? Largely New Hampshire and Iowa, and to some degree, South Carolina comes into play there. So right now, I don't think it's evidenced who's doing the best job at that. And that's one of the reasons why we're focused on doing that work now. Because while candidates are trying to become the nominee, somebody's got to be engaging these communities so that once a nominee is decided, we're ready to just hit go. That we're not waiting for that process to be determined. But I'll tell you, it's going to be important in the outcome of our work to ensure that the candidates out there are talking about the issues that are hitting on something. So if you're not talking about what it means to work a job that pays you a wage that you can pay all your bills at the end of the month, rather than having to barter between which bill you can pay before the lights get turned off, if you're not talking about what it means to create economic opportunity for Black women business owners who are still at the very back of the line when it comes to getting startup investment in their businesses and their ability to compete to gain wealth in this country, if you're not talking about the student loan debt and the way in which it is burdening and saddling this next youngest generation of people who are, quite frankly, pretty hopeless, about their future and their ability to achieve the American dream because they're so, frankly, entrenched in trying to pay a monthly, debt burden that, quite frankly, is inordinate and one that they shouldn't have to bear. Certainly not bear by themselves. So rather than, the individual candidates, I think we got to really talk about the issues that are going to turn people in this election. They're at the centerpiece, and I could not be more disappointed in the Florida legislature and in our new governor, who has signaled he is going to sign this piece of legislation into law. Listen, 65% of the people in my state decided that we were going to be a state of second chances, that we were going to be a state that doesn't judge people forever by their worst mistake or by their worst day. And the Florida legislature, because they are so hungry for power, the Republicans, who are right now in control, decided that they were going to pass what I believe is a poll tax to keep people from being able to access the ballot box. Voters were very clear on what we approved. The language, every single letter that ended up on the ballot that constituted the Amendment 4 had to be approved by the Florida Supreme Court. And nowhere in that language was there pay, fines, fees, restitution, court costs as a condition of being able to get your rights restored. That was added by the Republican right-wing legislature in an effort to quiet and to silence the voices of marginalized communities. Well, I don't think we've heard the end of this. While they may pass it into law, I believe we're going to have an engaged and vigorous litigation, hopefully in the federal court system, that calls this exactly what it is, another illegal barrier keeping regular people from being able to access their constitutional right to vote. I believe it is wrong. I believe it is illegal, and I believe it will ultimately be overturned.